The music was loud, pulsing through the walls of the crowded room. Glasses clinked, voices intertwined, and laughter echoed around me. It was just another party. I stood by the bar, absent-mindedly swirling the ice in my drink, watching the crowd shift and sway. Holly was somewhere in that sea of people, but she hadn't been by my side for a while now. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her. I scanned the room, and that's when I noticed them. Holly and Kit, off in the corner, deep in conversation. Their heads were tilted close, too close. I watched as she laughed at something he said, her hand brushing against his arm in a way that made my stomach tighten. They'd been over there for a while now, too long for just small talk. Something about it didn't feel right. I tried to shake it off. Kit was a friend, after all. We'd known each other for years, and I trusted him. But still, the way they stood there as if the rest of the party didn't exist, set me on edge. "Hey, Ryan." I turned to see Karen stumbling toward me, her heels clicking unevenly on the floor. Her cheeks were flushed, and I could smell the alcohol on her breath from a few feet away. Karen was one of Holly's oldest friends, and tonight she was more than a little drunk. She leaned against the bar, sloshing some of her drink over the edge of the glass. "You look like you're about to murder someone," she slurred with a lopsided grin. I forced a smile. "Just tired, I guess." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't give me that. You're mad, aren't you? I mean, you must know by now." My heart skipped a beat. "Know what?" Karen blinked at me, her brow furrowing in confusion as if the answer was obvious. Then she laughed again, a sound that grated against my nerves. "Come on, Ryan, it's not a secret anymore. Holly and Kit, I mean, how could you not see it? They've been sneaking around for months." The world tilted. I stood there, staring at her, trying to process what she had just said. A slow, sickening realization crept over me, freezing me in place. What are you talking about?" Karen's eyes widened, realizing too late that she'd said too much. She covered her mouth with her hand, but the damage was already done. "Oh no," I thought. I mean, I assumed you knew." My chest tightened, a wave of nausea rising as the room seemed to close in around me. The music became a dull roar in the background, and all I could focus on was the image of Holly and Kit together, too close, too familiar. Karen, in her drunken state, kept rambling, trying to backpedal. "I mean, it's not like they meant to hurt you. It just happened, you know? These things happen." I didn't hear the rest of what she said. Her voice faded into the background as I turned my head back toward the corner of the room where I'd last seen them. Holly and Kit were gone. My hand tightened around the glass in my hand until my knuckles turned white. Months. They'd been sneaking around for months. Behind my back. Kit, my friend. Holly, my wife. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut, and I could feel the anger building inside me, hot and fast. I had to get out of there. Without another word to Karen, I pushed my way through the crowd and out the door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I couldn't think straight. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts swirling together in a chaotic mess. All I knew was that everything had just changed. The cold air outside hit me like a wall, sharp and biting, but it did nothing to clear my head. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins as if I'd just been in a fight. In a way, I had been. Only this wasn't a punch I could dodge or swing back at. This was betrayal, sudden and brutal, sinking deep into my gut like a knife I never saw coming. I couldn't breathe right. My hands were trembling as I ran them through my hair, trying to steady myself, trying to make sense of what I just heard. Holly, Kit, together, months. It was as if Karen's words were still echoing in my mind, circling over and over, hitting me with the same force each time. How long had this been happening? How many nights had they lied to me? The thought churned my stomach, and a wave of nausea rolled through me. I felt like a fool, like I'd been living in some alternate reality where everything was fine, while my wife and my best friend, were sneaking around behind my back. I leaned against the side of the building, pressing my forehead against the cold brick, hoping it would somehow calm the storm that was raging inside of me. But it didn't help. Nothing did. How could I have missed this? Every conversation, every moment we spent together, now felt tainted, like a sick, twisted game that everyone knew about except me. Were people laughing behind my back? Did everyone know? I replayed the past few months in my mind, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when things had gone wrong. But nothing stood out. Nothing obvious, anyway. I'd trusted them both so blindly. I thought Holly and I were happy. Sure, we had our ups and downs. Like any couple, but this? This was something else. And Kit, God, he was like a brother to me. I trusted him with everything, and this is how he repaid me. By sleeping with my wife? A bitter laugh escaped my lips, and I kicked at the ground in frustration, feeling utterly powerless. Questions flooded my mind, one after another until I couldn't think straight. Why didn't Holly tell me? Why did she keep lying, pretending everything was fine? Why didn't Kit come clean? How long were they planning on keeping this up? And why didn't anyone, tell me? It made me sick. All of it. The lies, the secrecy, the sheer audacity of it. How many times had I been in the same room with both of them, completely oblivious to what was going on behind my back? How many times had they shared knowing looks while I sat there, none the wiser? I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about the people closest to me, had just shattered. And now, I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to piece it all together. Trying to figure out what the hell to do next. I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up again, hotter this time, burning through the shock. I wanted to hit something, anything, to make the pain go away, to make this nightmare stop. But there was no outlet for this. No way to undo what had been done. The betrayal was real, and it was staring me in the face. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand here, wallowing in shock and confusion. But what? What the hell do you do when the people you trust the most rip your life apart? There were no answers, only questions. And with every passing second, the rage inside me grew. They would regret this. The next morning felt surreal, like the world had shifted on its axis overnight. The usual sounds of the house, the hum of the coffee machine, the soft clink of dishes, seemed distant, almost muted. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, watching the steam rise, but I wasn't there. My mind was somewhere else, trapped in the events of the previous night, replaying every word Karen had said. Holly moved around the kitchen like nothing had changed, like she hadn't been lying to me for months. She smiled at me over her shoulder as she poured herself a cup of coffee, and it took everything in me to keep my face neutral, to not give away the storm of anger and hurt that churned just beneath the surface. "Morning," she said, her voice soft and casual. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. I was going to play this smart. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I needed proof. I needed to be sure, to see it with my own eyes. So I waited. I watched. The day passed in a blur, with Holly going about her usual routine, and me pretending like everything was fine. But beneath the surface, I was hyper-aware of every little thing she did, every word she said. The way her phone lit up with a message and how quickly she turned the screen away. The slight hesitation in her voice when she mentioned Kit. The distracted way she listened when I spoke. I was looking for cracks. For signs that something was off. And I was starting to see them. Later that afternoon, Kit came by. He and I were supposed to grab a drink, something we'd planned earlier in the week, back when everything still felt normal. Now, the idea of spending time with him made my skin crawl, but I couldn't back out without raising suspicion. He walked in with his usual easy smile, and for a moment, I almost believed it was all in my head. That maybe I'd imagined everything. But then I saw it. The way his eyes flickered to Holly when he thought I wasn't looking. It was quick and subtle, but it was there. A familiarity that went beyond friendship. A shared secret. We talked, made small talk, and laughed even. But I couldn't focus. I was too busy watching them, dissecting every glance, every word. They weren't overly obvious, but the signs were there. The way Holly smiled a little too warmly at his jokes. The way Kit seemed just a bit too comfortable in my house, like he belonged there. Like they belonged together. At one point, Holly got up to get something from the kitchen. And Kit's eyes followed her as she left the room. It was subtle, just a brief flicker of something in his expression, but it was enough. That look, the same one I'd caught the night before, confirmed everything. They weren't just friends. There was something more, something deeper. And they thought they could keep it hidden from me. My blood boiled, but I kept my face blank. I couldn't let them see the truth yet. Not until I had everything. Not until I knew exactly how long they'd been betraying me. When Holly came back, Kit's expression shifted, back to normal, back to the mask he always wore around me. But now, I saw it for what it was. A lie. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversations and polite laughter, but all I could think about was what I'd seen. The way their eyes met when they thought I wasn't paying attention, The unspoken connection between them that had been hiding in plain sight. I wasn't imagining it. Karen hadn't been wrong. Holly and Kit were having an affair. And now I had seen it for myself. The details were small and insignificant to anyone else, but to me, they were glaring red flags. I spent the night lying next to Holly in bed, staring up at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me, her breathing slow and steady. I felt sick. Sick that she could sleep so easily while lying to me. Sick that Kit had the nerve to sit in my house, drink my beer, and act like my friend while secretly destroying my life. But now I knew. I had seen it with my own eyes. And there was no going back. This was just the beginning. The house was still, bathed in the soft, eerie glow of moonlight filtering through the bedroom curtains. Holly was asleep next to me, her breathing steady and peaceful, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts churning, my heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the rage coursing through my veins. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't confront them, not yet. I knew how that would play out. They'd deny it, gaslight me, and twist the truth until I was the one questioning my sanity. They'd make me feel like the bad guy, like I was overreacting. And then they'd continue, slipping back into their comfortable little lie while I was left broken and humiliated. No, that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. If they thought they could get away with this, they were wrong. I turned my head slightly, glancing at Holly's face in the dim light. She looked so innocent, so untouched by guilt. The same face I'd loved for years, the same woman I trusted. But now, that trust had been shattered. I could barely stand to look at her. I had to make them pay. Both of them. My mind raced, forming ideas and sketching out possibilities. I wasn't just going to confront them, I was going to destroy them. Quietly, methodically, just like they'd destroyed me. And I knew exactly where to start. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, my feet barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. Holly stirred slightly but didn't wake. She had no idea what was coming. In the dark living room, I sat down with my laptop, the soft glow of the screen illuminating my face. I hesitated for only a moment, the gravity of what I was about to do settling over me. But the hesitation didn't last long. They had taken everything from me, my trust, my dignity. Now, it was my turn. I opened a new browser window and logged out of my accounts. Then, with deliberate precision, I began creating a new one. A fake one. Kit's name filled the fields, his email address, and his birthday. I chose a profile picture that I knew he used on other platforms, one that would make it all look convincing. This was going to be more than just a prank or some petty revenge. I was going to tear apart his life from the inside out, just like he had done to mine. I would start small, subtle, nothing too outrageous at first. Just enough to get people talking, to plant seeds of doubt about him. And then I'd escalate, slowly, cruelly. Once the account was set up, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the fake profile on the screen. Kit's smiling face stared back at me, completely unaware of what I had planned for him. For the first time that night, I felt a small sense of control. I was no longer the victim in this situation. Now, I was the one pulling the strings. The first post had to be subtle, just enough to raise eyebrows, but not so much that it screamed for attention. People would notice, but they wouldn't think much of it, at least. Not at first. I needed them to start asking questions on their own, to let doubt take root in their minds. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I began typing. Lately, I've been thinking about life, about choices I've made. Not sure I'm where I thought I'd be. Maybe it's time for some changes. I read it over a few times. It was vague, harmless on the surface, but open to interpretation. People could read it as a personal reflection, a midlife crisis, or even a hint at something deeper. Something wrong. It didn't matter how they interpreted it. What mattered was that it planted the first seed of doubt in Kit's world. Satisfied, I clicked post and watched as the message went live, hanging there in the digital space for anyone to see. It felt strange, this sense of power, knowing that I was controlling Kit's voice now, twisting it to my purpose. At first, nothing happened. The post just sat there, like any other status update in the endless scroll of social media. But within minutes, the first reactions started to trickle in, likes, heart emojis, a few comments from friends, mostly casual remarks like, "Hang in there, man," or "Everything okay?" I smiled. It wasn't much, but it was a start. People were paying attention, starting to wonder what was going on in Kit's life. And that was exactly what I wanted. Just enough interest to make people curious, but not enough to set off alarms. I scrolled through the comments, resisting the urge to respond. This had to look natural. Like Kit was dealing with something personal but wasn't ready to talk about it yet. The more I stayed quiet, the more people would speculate. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation settling over me. The post had been small, barely a ripple in the vast ocean of social media. But I knew the ripple would grow, slowly but surely, as more people noticed, as more questions were asked. I wasn't in a rush. This was going to be a slow burn. The real damage would come later, with each new post pushing Kit further into a hole he couldn't dig himself out of. His friends would start wondering what was wrong, his colleagues might question his stability, and eventually, even Holly would notice. She'd watch as Kit's reputation began to crumble, and she wouldn't have a clue that I was the one pulling the strings. I glanced toward the bedroom, where Holly still slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing just outside the walls of our home. For now, I'd keep pretending, keep playing the role of the loving husband. But in the background, I'd be building my revenge, one post at a time. The game had officially begun, and I was in control. Over the next few days, the fake account became a weapon, silent, sharp, and deadly. Each post I made was carefully crafted, pushing the boundaries just enough to make people uncomfortable, but not so much that it seemed forced or unnatural. It was a slow, deliberate poisoning of Kit's reputation, one drip of venom at a time. At first, the posts were still vague, but laced with hints of something darker. It's strange how the people closest to you never really know what's going on inside. Some secrets are too hard to share. This one got a little more attention, more likes, more comments. People started offering advice and encouragement, thinking Kit was going through some emotional struggle. But I didn't respond, letting the silence linger, fueling the mystery. Then, I started pushing the envelope further. I knew it had to escalate, that people needed something juicier to sink their teeth into. So the next post was more direct, more scandalous. I've made mistakes, hurt people I care about. Sometimes, I wonder if I deserve the life I have. That one hit like a bomb. People began speculating wildly in the comments. What kind of mistakes was Kit talking about? Was he cheating on someone? Was he in trouble? The post was just vague enough that it could be about anything, but just specific enough to set people's imaginations on fire. By the third post, I was ready to twist the knife. I thought I could keep it hidden, but it's eating me alive. I can't live with the guilt anymore. I don't know how to fix this. That one sent shockwaves through Kit's social circle. Mutual friends were texting him, calling him, asking what was going on. Some even messaged him directly on the fake account, trying to offer help. I left those messages unanswered, letting the silence speak for itself. It was perfect, just enough to make people think Kit was on the edge of something dark. Something dangerous. In real life, Holly seemed to notice that something was off. She mentioned, almost casually, that Kit had been acting strange lately, that he wasn't returning her texts as quickly, that he seemed distant. I played dumb, nodding along, and offering concerned but non-committal responses. Maybe he's going through something, I suggested, my voice laced with just the right amount of sympathy. Holly frowned, chewing on her bottom lip. Yeah, maybe. I just hope he's okay. I wanted to laugh at how clueless she was, how she couldn't see the web I was weaving around her and Kit. But I kept my mask firmly in place, playing the role of the caring husband, all the while knowing that the posts were starting to have the desired effect. And then, I dropped the real bombshell. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt her. But the affair, it's gone too far. I'm afraid I've lost everything. The fallout was immediate. Comments exploded, people demanding to know what Kit was talking about. Speculating about who her might be. Some guessed it was his wife, others wondered if he was talking about someone else's partner. The ambiguity worked in my favor. Everyone had their theory, and with each new guess, Kit's reputation took another hit. It didn't take long for whispers to start circulating among our mutual friends. I overheard snippets of conversations when we met with others, side glances, awkward silences when Kit's name was mentioned. People were talking about him, wondering if he had cheated, if he was falling apart behind the scenes. His absence at social gatherings, likely out of guilt or confusion, only added fuel to the fire. Soon, people would be questioning everything about him, his loyalty, his honesty, even his sanity. And the best part? Kit had no idea where it was all coming from. He didn't know that his world was slowly being torn apart from the inside, by someone he had trusted completely. And Holly? She still didn't see it. She had no idea that the affair she thought was so carefully hidden was now the talk of our entire social circle. I watched her every day, waiting for the cracks to appear, for the moment when she'd realize that everything was unraveling. The posts kept coming, more erratic, more damaging. Kit's confessions of personal failures, financial problems, and infidelities painted a picture of a man spiraling out of control. A man teetering on the edge of a complete breakdown. And I knew it was only a matter of time before both Kit and Holly would be caught in the collapse. They had started this, with their lies. Their betrayal. Now, I was finishing it. One post at a time. Holly was pacing around the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her brow furrowed in confusion. I could see the worry etched on her face, the way her shoulders tensed with every step. She had been on edge for days, ever since Kit's confessions started popping up on social media. "It's just weird," she muttered, more to herself than to me, but loud enough for me to catch it. "This isn't like him." I watched her carefully from my spot on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in the TV. "What's weird?" I asked, trying to sound casual like I wasn't already deeply invested in her answer. She sighed, stopping in her tracks, her eyes glued to her phone screen. "Kit, he's been posting all this strange stuff online. Like, personal things. And when I ask him about it, he either dodges the question or acts like it's not a big deal." I sat up a little, feigning concern. "What kind of things?" Holly chewed on her lip, scrolling through Kit's latest post. "He's talking about mistakes, regrets, and then this morning, he posted something about an affair. He won't say who, but it's like he's unraveling in front of everyone. I don't get it. It's not like him to air his dirty laundry like that." I forced myself to keep a straight face, hiding the satisfaction that was bubbling up inside me. It was working. Kit's public persona was slowly disintegrating, and Holly was starting to feel the strain. But I couldn't let her see my enjoyment, not yet. "That sounds rough," I said, keeping my voice even. "Maybe he's just going through something. A midlife crisis or whatever." She looked at me, her eyes clouded with concern. "Maybe, but it's starting to affect things between us. We've been arguing a lot lately. I don't know, it's like he's pushing me away." She paused, then added, "He's never been like this before." I fought the urge to smirk. Of course, Kit wasn't like this before, because he wasn't the one writing those posts. But Holly didn't need to know that. Not yet. Instead, I shrugged, offering what I hoped was a sympathetic look. "Maybe you should talk to him. See if there's something he's not telling you." Holly's face twisted into a frown. "I've tried, but every time I bring it up, he gets defensive. Says it's just venting, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like he's deliberately putting things out there to get a reaction, but I don't know why." I nodded slowly, my mind racing with the possibilities. The tension between them was growing. Just like I'd planned, the posts were doing their job, chipping away at the foundation of their secret relationship. Soon, they wouldn't be able to hide their problems from the rest of the world, or each other. As the days went on, the distance between Holly and Kit became more obvious. She would complain to me about their arguments, how he would dodge her questions, how he refused to explain his cryptic posts. It was almost amusing, watching her become more frustrated with each passing day. While I played the role of the supportive husband, offering her a shoulder to lean on. Then, one night, the dam finally broke. Holly came home late, her face flushed with anger. She barely acknowledged me as she stormed into the kitchen, tossing her bag onto the counter with more force than necessary. "What happened?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. She spun around, her eyes flashing with frustration. "I don't know what's going on with him anymore. We had another fight, about those damn posts. I asked him why he kept airing his problems in public, and he just snapped. He accused me of not understanding him, of not being there for him. It's like he's a completely different person." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Kit snapping at her was just the icing on the cake. The cracks in their relationship were widening, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Maybe he's feeling guilty about something," I said, choosing my words carefully. "People act out when they're hiding things." Holly's face twisted with confusion, then doubt. "Guilty? About what?" I shrugged, feigning ignorance. "I don't know. But if he's posting about an affair, maybe it's his way of trying to come clean without actually telling you. The look on her face was priceless, a mix of shock, confusion, and the beginnings of suspicion. It was the first time I'd seen real doubt cross her mind, and I knew I had planted the seed. She fell silent after that, lost in her thoughts. I watched her, knowing that the cracks between her and Kit were now too deep to ignore. They would keep arguing, keep pulling away from each other, and I'd be there to watch it all fall apart. The posts would continue, growing more damning, more scandalous. And soon, there would be nothing left of the trust they once had. All I had to do was wait and enjoy the show. The next phase of my plan required precision. Everything I'd done up until now had been a slow build, little fires here and there, sowing doubt, stirring up tension. But this would be the match that lit the inferno. I waited for the right moment, biding my time as Kit's personal life crumbled. The arguments between him and Holly had become more frequent. I could see the weariness in her face, and the frustration in her voice when she talked about him. She was losing faith in him, and it was delicious to witness. But now, it was time to take things to the next level. I sat down at my laptop late one night, long after Holly had gone to bed. My heart raced as I crafted the post, knowing exactly how this would play out. Kit had a good job, a solid career, and a sterling reputation at his company. But that was about to change. The post I wrote from his account was simple but devastating. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I've made some bad decisions at work. Cut corners. Mismanaged funds. It's only a matter of time before someone finds out. I read it over several times, making sure it was just vague enough to seem like a guilty confession but clear enough to raise eyebrows. Kit's colleagues would see this. His boss would see this. And none of them would be able to ignore it. I hesitated for only a second before clicking post. A shiver ran down my spine as I watched the words go live, knowing that with this single action, I'd set into motion something Kit couldn't come back from. It didn't take long for the reaction to start. Within hours, the post had been shared and commented on by dozens of people, colleagues, friends, even family. The whispers of Kit's possible misconduct spread like wildfire through his workplace. And just as I had predicted, the company launched an internal investigation within days. Kit was blindsided. The fallout was swift and brutal. His boss called him in for a meeting, demanding an explanation for the post. Kit, of course, denied everything, swearing up and down that he hadn't written it, that someone was impersonating him. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. People started to distance themselves from him, both in and out of the office. His colleagues avoided eye contact in the hallways and whispered behind his back during meetings. Friends who had once been supportive now questioned his integrity. Even the few who believed Kit might not be responsible weren't willing to stick their necks out for him. And then, there was Holly. She had been watching the chaos unfold, her concern for Kit growing with each new post. But this was different. This wasn't just some personal confession. This was Kit's career, his livelihood. And now, there was a very real possibility that he could lose it all. One night, as we sat on the couch, Holly finally voiced her doubts. "I just don't get it," she said quietly, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through the comments on Kit's latest post. Why would he do this? Why would he confess something like that online, where everyone can see? I shrugged, playing my part as the clueless, supportive husband. Maybe he's feeling guilty. Sometimes people confess to things because they want to get caught. She shook her head, frustration bubbling to the surface. But he keeps denying it. He says he didn't post any of this. That someone's trying to frame him. I could see the cracks in her belief. The way she was struggling to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the version of him she was seeing online. I had to nudge her just a little further. People do strange things when they're stressed, I said. Maybe he's in denial. Maybe he's trying to cover his tracks. Holly's face twisted in uncertainty, and I could see the doubt creeping in. Kit had tried to convince her that something wasn't right. That someone else was behind the posts, but the evidence was too damning. The words were coming from his account, after all. And if he were innocent, why hadn't he done more to stop it? A few days later, Kit made his move, desperately trying to salvage what was left of his reputation. He went to his boss, to HR, claiming his account had been hacked. He even provided evidence, password changes, and security breaches. But by then, it was too late. No one believed him. His boss had already started the investigation. And Kit's confession was hanging over him like a noose. The rumor mill had done its job, and even those who might have believed his story couldn't risk being associated with him. His career, once spotless, was now tainted by suspicion and scandal. In his personal life, things weren't any better. Friends who once stood by him now questioned his honesty. And Holly, well, I could see the conflict in her eyes every time she brought him up. She wanted to believe him, but the evidence was too overwhelming. One night, she sat on the edge of our bed, her hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Kit keeps telling me this isn't him, but how can I trust that? Why would anyone go to such lengths to destroy him?" I leaned over, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Maybe it's time to let go," I said gently. "If Kit's not being honest with you, you have to think about what's best for you." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She didn't respond, but I could tell that my words had struck a chord. Kit's credibility was crumbling, and soon, Holly would be too tired to keep defending him. Everything was going exactly as I had planned. Kit's life was unraveling, and soon, he'd be left with nothing. All it took was a few posts, and a few lies, and the world was turning against him. And no one suspected a thing. Holly had always been perceptive. She had a way of reading people, of picking up on subtle changes in mood or behavior. And she was starting to apply that intuition to me. I could feel her eyes on me more often, like she was searching for something just beneath the surface. But I stayed calm and controlled. The key to keeping my plan intact was making sure she never saw through the mask I had so carefully crafted. It had been weeks since the post about Kit's work scandal, and his life was in free fall. He had been suspended pending investigation, and rumors swirled about possible legal consequences. His reputation was in tatters, and there was no one left to defend him. Except for Holly. Even after everything, there was still a part of her that wanted to believe in Kit's innocence. She never said it out loud, but I could see it in the way she talked about him, the way her voice softened with doubt. She wasn't ready to let go completely, not yet. But that was about to change. One evening, Holly came home after meeting with some mutual friends. She seemed distant, lost in thought, her brow furrowed as she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through her hair. I could tell something was on her mind, and I waited, knowing that eventually, she would bring it up. "It's just so strange," she finally said, breaking the silence. "Kit's not the kind of person to do this. I mean, he's always been so careful, so private. Why would he suddenly start confessing everything online? And then deny it when confronted?" I leaned back in my chair, pretending to mull it over. Maybe the pressure got to him. People can change when they're pushed too far. She shook her head, her frown deepening. "But it doesn't make sense. He's saying someone hacked his account, and that he didn't post any of those things. And part of me wonders if he's telling the truth." I could feel the tension rising, but I stayed calm, careful not to react too strongly. "Holly, think about it," I said, keeping my tone measured. "If Kit was hacked, wouldn't he have done more to prove it? Gone to the police, hired someone to fix it? Instead, he's been dodging questions and acting like it's not a big deal. Doesn't that seem strange?" She hesitated, doubt flickering in her eyes. "I guess. But still, something just doesn't add up." I could see her resolve weakening, the cracks in her trust widening. All I needed was one more push. "Look," I said, reaching for her hand, "I know it's hard. Kit's been your friend for a long time. But people change. Maybe he's not the person you thought he was. Maybe he's been hiding things from everyone, and now it's all coming out." She looked down, her shoulders sagging under the weight of it all. "I just don't understand why he'd do this. Why would he risk everything? His job, his friendships. Because he's not thinking straight," I said softly. "He's spiraling, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You've tried to help him, but maybe it's time to step back. To protect yourself." Holly nodded slowly, her face etched with uncertainty. I could tell that she was close to breaking, that the last threads of her loyalty to Kit were unraveling. And then, just as I had hoped, she made the decision. "I think you're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep defending him." It was the moment I had been waiting for. Over the next few days, Holly distanced herself from Kit completely. She stopped answering his texts and stopped meeting with him for their usual coffee chats. When he tried to reach out, she cut the conversation short, offering vague excuses about being too busy. But I knew the truth. She was done with him. The final blow came when Holly told me she was planning to break things off with Kit for good. I can't trust him anymore, she said, her voice heavy with resignation. Every time I try to talk to him, it just turns into an argument. He's not the same person he used to be. I nodded, pretending to share her sadness. Sometimes people just drift apart. It's not your fault. But inside, I was elated. Kit had lost everything, his job, his reputation, and now, the one person who had still believed in him. His world was crumbling, and I had orchestrated every part of it. The breakup wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no tearful goodbyes. Just a quiet message from Holly, letting Kit know that she couldn't be in his life anymore. That she couldn't trust him. After that, Kit stopped coming around. Our circle of friends, once tight-knit, began to shift. People who had once been close to him now kept their distance, unsure of what to believe. The rumors about his work scandal, his affair, and his mental state had taken on a life of their own. Kit had become a pariah, and no one wanted to be caught in the fallout. Meanwhile, I played the role of the supportive husband to perfection. I comforted Holly when she felt guilty about cutting ties with Kit, and reassured her that she had made the right decision. And as our friends slowly turned their backs on him, I watched with satisfaction as Kit's life disintegrated. Everything had gone according to plan. And now, standing on the wreckage of Kit's life, I couldn't help but smile. This was the revenge I had been waiting for. The atmosphere in our home shifted. Holly had started to piece together the threads of what had happened, her instincts sharper than I had anticipated. I could see the doubt lurking in her eyes, and I knew the day would come when she would confront me about it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a warm glow through the windows, I sensed the tension building. Holly sat across from me at the dining table, her fingers tapping nervously against her glass. She took a deep breath, her expression serious. "Rye, we need to talk." I feigned ignorance, leaning back in my chair. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Her gaze hardened, and I felt a chill creep into the air. "It's about Kit, about everything that's been happening." My heart raced, but I maintained a calm exterior. "What about him? I can't shake the feeling that you know more than you're letting on. That maybe you're involved somehow." I kept my expression neutral, hiding the panic building inside. "What do you mean? I'm just as confused as you are." She leaned in, her voice low but intense. "The way you've talked about him lately, it's like you've been waiting for something like this to happen. And all those posts, it just doesn't feel right." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling on my chest like a heavy stone. "Holly, come on. You know me. Why would I want to hurt Kit? He's your friend. Is he, though? Or has he been a distraction? A way for you to control the narrative?" The room fell silent as I searched for the right words, my mind racing. I had to keep her from the truth, but the very act of denying it only seemed to deepen her suspicion. "Holly," I said, my voice steady, "I would never do anything to hurt you or your friendships. You know that." Her eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty. "But what if you did? What if you're the reason all of this is happening? I can't help but wonder if—" "Enough," I interrupted, leaning forward. "You're being paranoid. You can't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Kit is in trouble, and you need to focus on your well-being." She looked taken aback by my outburst, but I could see her resolve wavering. Deep down, I felt a pang of guilt. I had spun this web of deceit, but now, it was beginning to ensnare me as well. I couldn't let her discover the truth, not now. But as the days turned into weeks, the tension lingered. Holly became more observant and more skeptical. And it was only a matter of time before she connected the dots. I felt like a dam about to burst, and I was trapped in my creation. Then, one night, it happened. We were watching TV, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I could sense her hesitation, the way her mind was racing even as she pretended to focus on the screen. It was a moment of vulnerability, and I knew I had to make a choice. As I turned to her, ready to reassure her, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from one of my friends, gossiping about Kit's downfall, about how far he'd fallen from grace. The words were cruel, and for a split second, I felt a rush of satisfaction at the thought of it all. But then I looked at Holly, and something shifted in me. I could tell she was struggling, trying to decipher my true feelings amidst the chaos. At that moment, I was faced with a choice: confess everything and lose her trust, or continue the lie and risk it all coming crashing down around me. I chose the latter. "Holly, I promise you, I have nothing to do with this," I said, forcing sincerity into my voice. "Let's focus on the future. We'll get through this together." She hesitated but then nodded, slowly, as if she were convincing herself. Okay, I want to believe you. As the relief washed over me, I realized how deep my deception had become. I had manipulated the situation to exact my revenge, and now I was standing at the precipice, enjoying the victory while the truth hung dangerously close. But it didn't matter. I had won. I leaned back, allowing a smile to creep onto my face, one that I hoped Holly wouldn't see. The satisfaction of revenge coursed through me, overshadowing the guilt that whispered at the back of my mind. No matter how much I'd lost in this game, I had gotten my revenge. And for now, that was enough.